Welcome to D1 Ticker. I'm Matt Banker, and I'm pleased to be joined by Megan Brown, who's the head coach at Longwood University. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are here in Louisville at the National Fastpitch Coaches Association Convention, and a lot of buzz around the hallways as the season's only a few weeks away. And I want to first talk to you about your team and what the outlook looks like for 2024.
We're very excited. We actually just released our schedule earlier in the week, so very excited to have the opportunity to play some really good competition, preparing us for what will be a tough Big South schedule. Our conference is very frequently decided by one game, so we're excited for the opportunity to prepare and then to compete in conference.
And some of the marquee wins you had even in the last couple of years have been against Power 5 schools, ACC schools in particular. How important is the non-conference scheduling to prepare you for the conference schedule?
It's absolutely paramount. I mean, the thing with your conference is you're seeing each other so very much. And so preparing how do you compete against a team that there's no more secrets? And how do you continue to find ways to win ball games when you've really got to go out and beat your competition? You're not gonna be able to call a trick play. There's not gonna be anything you can pull out of the hat to win a ball game. You've got to be able to execute on a consistent basis. Winning is a set of executable skills. Whoever executes them the best usually wins the ball game. But if you only know the people that play in your backyard, then that's kind of your view of the world and the landscape. But when you go and play everybody, then it's like, all right, now we know what's out there. The fear of the unknown is one of the hardest things for players to kind of overcome when they're making adjustments or they're trying to grow their skill. So when you see what's out there and you know what's known, now that fear factor goes down and we can really start growing and playing. The other piece is, if you're competing for championships, you're obviously wanting to make a run into postseason. And if the first time you've seen a big Power 5 team, the veneer and the everything is so overwhelming. They used to talk about with UConn women's basketball, it was very difficult to beat them the first time you played them because it was so overwhelming. Well, if you're trying to continue to grow and build, you got to go see that and say, okay, now we've seen it, we come back, we grow, we learn, and we come back out and compete again.
A lot of schools, invest more in the sport performance the last several years, and that includes sports psychology. Is that something that you bring to the table, and not just your coaching staff, but Longwood Athletics and even just preparing for those things when you're playing sort of a marquee or highly ranked opponent?
We have been really blessed this year with a lot of the changes that the Division I committees have been making to enhance our sport performance in the mental health side and the performance side. But a lot of it is having conversations with your team and kind of, turning the light on and seeing what the monster under the bed is. Is it your dirty sock or is it really the monster that lives under there? And so having those things, they talk about putting it on the top of the table and really talking about what are we fearful of? What are we wanting to see? What is success today? And then really going out there and competing.
So you kind of referenced a little bit too, obviously execution on the field, performance, obviously getting really good results the last couple of years as well. I want to ask you about some of the playing rule changes that have come forward in softball. Anything that stands out to you? What are you looking forward to? Things that you're kind of interested if this is going to actually work? And I know speed of play has been one of the topics, but anything related to on the field playing rule changes that stand out to you?
I'm really excited for the changes that we're making. I think it's providing a lot of clarity for our game, which is always important when you're competing at such high levels, a lot of emotion. Clarity and the ability to consistently make calls is always really important. I'm excited for the changes we're making with our pitching rules. As a pitching person, I think it's going to allow our game to continue to grow and continue to have that excitement of the fastness of our game, not just the between pitch timing, which is a piece, but the speed that pitchers are going to be able to throw, the reaction time, and all the pieces that brings that makes our game so exciting for fans to watch. I think it's just adding another element, and I think that's really exciting. I think it's also going to allow for umpires to focus on other pieces that really are impactful to the game, and not having so much in the minutia of the little things. They can now work on really appropriately calling the game, which is exciting. For pace of play, I think it's exciting. There's going to be gamesmanship within it, which is going to be an exciting twist. As coaches, we're always adapting and finding new ways for things. So I think it will be funny to see how it plays out. We've had gamemanship with what we've currently had, so it'll be interesting to almost see a new wave of that and how that's going to play in. But I think it's just going to continue to grow our sport and make it exciting to watch. So I think the future is exciting for us.
Yeah, we're just a few weeks away, and some of those changes, including the pitching rule change and the all that's going to change the dynamic for batters too. Like, are you approaching this as I'm sure a lot of coaches are having to meet with the batters about the strategy? Is that going to look different for them as they receive pitches?
I think it's definitely going to look different for both sides. I think hitters who really like that long reset between pitches, it's going to make them have to speed the process up, which is always, time is your friend in pressure, time is your enemy in some things. So sometimes too much time, you talk yourself in and out of all sorts of things. Sometimes time makes you rush to failure. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how do defense hold their final positioning till after calls are in, because they know the batter's got to be back in the box in 10 seconds. Is it going to be something where stuff is called 2 pitches in advance? I think it's going to be fun. The strategy of the game gets me in my little geeky brain too much probably, but I think that's going to be an exciting change.
Yeah, that's some of the inside softball, so to speak. That's really interesting stuff. You know, we're sitting here, there's a couple of poinsettias next to us, and it's the holiday season. And one of the things I also wanted to ask you about is related to recruiting. And softball just walked up to and has implemented shutdown periods, one of which was just over Thanksgiving. We've got a couple more coming up later this month into the new year. Has that been a good change?
I think it's been a great change. I think anytime we can make things really clear, I think it gets kind of wonky in the, well, you can do this, but not on the 3rd Tuesday of the month. But the 3rd Tuesday, it's raining, now you can do it. I think that's where we're all like, excuse me, what do we need to do? So I think it gets really simple when it's like, yes, you can do this, or no, you cannot do that. So I'm a big fan of let's just keep it simple and clear. So I like the shutdown period. I think it just very, very clearly defines what we're doing, what we're not doing. I do like the idea of let's all take a break and really invest in our families and being present with where we need to be. Because there's times where on game day, our presence is needed at other places maybe than our family. So I think it's great when we have those times and spaces to say, yeah, I can leave my phone wherever I want to, or do not disturb it, and be able to really just step away and not have any outside pressures to change that. And for our recruits as well, they need to enjoy their families and learn how to appropriately set those boundaries for themselves, not just us doing it. They need to do it as well. So I think it's a good trade-off.
Some of those opportunities to step away from recruiting, which is otherwise seemingly 365 days a year. Do you think that's good in particular for the coaching profession to say, like, look, we're trying to avoid people burning out. We want to develop younger coaches. How important are little things like that, changes of the recruiting calendar and otherwise, that will keep coaches in softball, from a bigger picture career perspective?
I think the biggest thing we have to do is make sure we're asking the right questions when we're looking at changes. And sometimes we tend to make decisions either one, trying to dictate morality to the world, which isn't going to work, or we're trying to prevent something. I love college football, but I get so aggravated and become such the Division I armchair quarterback when we do prevent defense. I'm like, why are we doing this? We're in this position because we were attacking the game. Why are we now preventing things? And I think we sometimes, when it comes to recruiting and decisions we're making, we're like trying to prevent something from happening instead of saying, okay, in 5 years or 10 years, where do we want our profession to be? That's the question we've got to ask. Because when we know where we want to be in 10 years as a profession, do we want to be in a place where you can have an amazing family and you can have a balance and you can enjoy your children growing up, but you can also be a passionate coach that teaches and develops young women to become great leaders in our world? If we want to develop that profession, then we've got to start on it now, because legislation and other pieces take time to come through. So I think we've got to make sure we're asking the right questions, because if we're not, we're answering the wrong things and we're doing it in the wrong way. So I think that's going to be the biggest piece going forward is what questions are we asking? Are they the right ones? And are they getting us where we want to be in 5 and 10 years? Because long-term coaches are really good coaches typically, because you can't go buy experience at Walmart. There's you can prepare yourself and you can do everything you want to do. When I was first being hired as a head coach, and they would say, you know, in the interview, is there anything else to add? It's like, the elephant in the room is I've never been a head coach. But at some point, Patty Gasso hadn't either, and somebody took a chance on them. And I'm really grateful that someone took a chance on me as a head coach. But those are things where you can't go by that. So coaches who have been in it for a while are great for our sport. But we've got to have a profession where that is feasible for folks to be in it long term, either through the time management piece, salary pieces, all these things that come into play. We've got to create an environment for long term, but also then to incentivize people to want to join our profession and not it just be, oh, I was a GA and it paid for my grad school, but now I'm going to go do a real job. They need that. We have to do those things long term.
Opportunities to educate. What is it like to be a coach? Those sorts of things to really kind of take the curtain back and understand there's some great opportunities here. Here's what it looks like. Here's what you're committing into. Those sorts of things. There's
a lot of pieces, and a lot of it is finding the right niche in the right place, and not feeling guilty of, I'm going to go step away and spend time with my family, and not go, oh, well, that must mean you don't want to work hard. It's helping kind of break down some of those misconceptions of what we're doing, because we tell our players, take time away, step away, breathe, and we know that they come back better. Mm-hmm. And yet we're quite terrible at it ourselves.
Something to be learned there for sure. I want to turn to, you mentioned a couple of words actually, legislation changes. There's been a lot of that going on in college sports the last few years, and two particular topics. I wanted to get your perspective from the softball lens of the portal, transfer portal, and name, image, likeness, just what that landscape looks like, but more acutely, what would you like to see changed or issues needing to be addressed specific to softball in those areas?
I think the transfer portal was a perfect storm for softball. And I know it's gotten crazy in many, many sports. So when the transfer portal first came, that was also a year where Division I had a record number of head coaching changes. I believe it was about 50 head coaching changes in the Division I level the first year the portal hit. So there was a lot of moving parts. And then I think about 2 years later, we had COVID, and now we have fifth years. And so I think we've had a bit of a perfect storm to make it kind of blow apart. I do think things will slow down now that the COVID years are running out. This is the last year, minus any medical red shirts, that we're going to be having those fifth years. I think things are going to slow down. I think there is a benefit to it. I think there's good and bad. I think if you're shopping around, 1 foot in, looking for your dream school to open up, those are commitment issues and things you have to have conversations with. I do think, though, that as a player who had an opportunity to go and play at a school for 4 years and had an amazing experience, creating amazing experience for our athletes is a positive thing. And misery loves company. And if you're not happy where you are, it's hard to be unhappy and a great teammate. So I think there's places that are great, but then I think it can be used for positive and it can be used for negative. And I think that's the whole piece of finding, is there tampering going on? Is it a good move for the young lady? Is it a good move for her team? I think it's a mixed bag of goods. So I think there's good and bad, but I do think it's going to calm. I'm saying that a bit hopefully, that it will calm.
Any other thoughts transfer portal wise, just with softball, just looking forward, kind of tweaks to what it is, or name, image, likeness? I know you kind of dove into transferring a little bit more there. Anything with NIL?
Again, I'm excited for some NIL. I think we've got to kind of wrap our brains around how this is going to work to avoid the kind of how it got put into play, the restrictions on it in the first place, the $50 handshake, which is probably now $500. But I think we've got to find ways to navigate where players aren't being paid to come to certain schools as far as, the donor with the mega bucks is like here. I think we've got to find the way to keep the purity of college athletics in place. We absolutely cannot lose the value of a college education. As someone who comes from a very blue-collar family, had it not been for softball, I would not have had the opportunity to receive the education that I have, and I am extremely grateful for that. I don't think we can ever overlook the ability to change one's entire life or even the future of an entire family from generational poverty to now we are on a different. I think first generation college students, I think we can't lose that piece because it's too important for so many young people. With only 1% going pro, we've got to have that. We can't lose that piece because the 99% of our athletes that are coming, getting a degree that they might not have if they didn't play a sport, and are now being able to provide for their families and bring so many great attributes to our communities, whether it be, a corporate CEO or your local kindergarten teacher who is, instilling the joy of learning to young people. They're both extremely valuable, and we can't lose that piece. I also have the side of, as a young woman, when I graduated college, signed my first pro contract for $1,000 for the entire season. I'm absolutely thrilled that these young women are having the opportunity to do this professionally and truly professionally. So I think there's some pieces we've got to clarify. We can't lose the value of an education and what that can produce long term, but I think it's exciting that there's opportunities for particularly women to do this at a professional level.
Super important point about education, and we're going to talk in a minute. I want to ask you actually about sort of the state of college sports generally, but you raise a really important point that needs to be in focus as these conversations at a very high level with Congress are being explored. Before we get to that, you did mention one other thing on the recruiting landscape I did want to ask you about, is tampering. Is there a tampering issue in softball?
I think if you have two people in a room, you probably have tampering, but we all hear the rumors. Rumors are about 50% true, so you take probably about half of the tampering that's being said is being done is actually being done. I think that's just, again, as we all say, it's the mirror test. Can you live with the decisions you make? The old saying, if a hot dog will get them in, a hamburger will get them out. What can we offer to? That's loyalty, that's pieces. We try very hard to be compliant in our recruiting rules and ask and do all those things, but my thing has always been, if I cheated to get you, I can't then hold you to any team standard. And that's the piece that I think on the practical side of it is, how can I tell you we have standards and we will uphold them and we will do certain things a certain way? It's like, yeah, but coach, you didn't follow the standard set for you. That one I don't have a response to, so.
Yep, good point, especially integrity and the athletes, the parents, they see that too, right? Kind of how that process played out. So kind of coming full circle, obviously earlier this week, President Charlie Baker from the NCAA issued a memo that's caught a lot of attention across college sports about where to go and kind of what maybe the high-resourced Division I institutions should maybe create a new subdivision. But that has ripple effects in all directions, all sports, and I'm just curious from a softball head coach's perspective, what was your first reaction when you saw that?
I've learned in the college landscape to reserve panic until we actually see what's going to actually be implemented full stop and how that's going to look. Again, I think our sport is going to continue to grow, which is an amazing time to be a softball coach because we're on ESPN and we're on ABC and all these beautiful things. So I think it's going to provide bigger opportunities for some. I think it's going to continue to push other levels to really continue to grow and develop. I also think there's amazing value in all of our divisions within the NCAA. I played as a Division II athlete, and I know some amazing people who coach Division II, III, and Division I. There's people who they love small Division I. Some people want the P5. There's a broad spectrum across the board of what every coach is finding, and I think that also then fits the broad spectrum of athletes that are having this opportunity. So I think we've got to be mindful of how we walk. I think we've got to walk slowly and not reactively to things. I think we need to be asking the right questions, and we need to be looking, where do we want to be in 10 years? Where do we want to be in 5 years? And then work back. Because if we don't, we're going to be always reacting, and that's not you can ask any coach, if you're constantly reacting to the other team, you're probably going to lose. If you're proactive and more attacking, you're usually going to be more successful. And I think that's where we've got to get really clear of where are we going and what's the path to get there.
Have a longer view, that's a really good perspective. One other thing I did want to ask you about, which is not the case for many coaches in any sport, is you have your PhD. Your Dr. Megan Brown. Tell us more about that. What did you study? What's your PhD in?
So I was really fortunate. My PhD is in kinesiology with a focus in sport pedagogy. So pedagogy is the art and science of teaching. How do you get your kids to get it? Whatever the it of the day is that we're trying to get them to get. How do people receive information and then process it to actually build skill? So skill building and the sequencing of that skill building and the process of that, just my friends are like, you just geeked out on us. And that's kind of always been something I'm very passionate about. I think you can teach anybody to do just about anything if you get the sequencing right. And so that was kind of the focus of that and has been kind of a hallmark of the coaching, but very grateful for it. My family gives me a hard time about it from time to time. It's like, aren't you a doctor? I'm like, well, not in that. Like, it's not all encompassing, you know?
When you were pursuing your PhD, was that being driven by the fact you wanted to be a coach or were a coach?
It was. I wanted to be a coach, but I wanted to be a good one. And not that you have to have a PhD to be a good coach. Obviously, there's amazing coaches. But for me, I wanted to know more. I wanted to know the intricacies of how to do this. I didn't know it. I wasn't very naturally good at it. I had to work really hard, and I wanted to know how to do it and learn how to do it, and then teach other people how to do it.
That's fantastic. Good finishing thought. Megan Brown, good luck to Longwood this spring.
Thank you very much.
Wish the best for you and your team.